us spend endless days and nights in negotiating rooms, and we come up with these political declarations and documents, and discuss the commas and the details of those. But it is really nice to see in this way how you have the SAMOA pathway there, and using that as your guidelines as you're moving to real concrete projects in countries on the ground that really change the lives of the people and really take development further. So that was very, very nice to see, and also talking about the involvement of all stakeholders, making sure that everybody is on the same page from the beginning to the end, and also talking about the project development skills, how important that is, that we need to make sure that very often there is even funding available and so on, but making sure that you can provide assistance in developing good, meaningful project is important, and also offering assistance for access to financing. I think these are key elements. Thank you very much for that. Next on my speakers list is a very brave man in this panel. I'm very happy to give the floor to Mr. Jamil Ahmed, who is the Deputy Director of United Nations Environmental Program New York office. And he has also been Secretary for the governing bodies of UNEP, and he has been the focal point of UNEP's external relations. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for this opportunity to give an overview of UNEP Environment's approach to supporting cities through partnership. But on a lighter note, I'd also like to thank you for recognizing the gender balance on this panel and for sympathizing with me. UNEP's approach to, while we wait for the slides.
And if possible, if we could get the slides also on the monitors in the front, that would be very useful for the panelists.
This is not me. It should say UNEP and UN Environment. No, this is not due to gender balance. This is technical. Okay.
Just bear with us a few minutes, still technical, till we can find the right presentation.
I can forfeit to the next panelist and come back while they're ready, in the interest of time, if that is the case.
All right, thank you very much. Let's do so, and can I kindly ask the technical people if they can just try and find the presentation and then confirm here once that presentation has been located. So I will give the floor to our next panelist, Ms. Amber Barth, who is currently a Senior Program Officer at the ILO, the International Labour Organization. She has worked as a policy advisor on issues relating to financing for development, sustainable development and green jobs, impact of globalization on poverty eradication, and decent work in fragile settings. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you for that warm introduction. And at the outset, I too must take this opportunity to extend a special thanks to the government of the Bahamas for coordinating and organizing this meeting, and of course to the Secretariat and UNDESA for inviting the ILO to present some perspective on partnerships, which partnerships are something that are very familiar to the ILO because it is a unique feature enshrined in its constitution and in our structure. The tripartite nature of the ILO, through which governments share a special responsibility with workers and employers to ensure that all activities that we do are carried out in partnership with business and labor. In other words, for the ILO, partnerships is something part of its DNA. Of course, this does not mean that the ILO has a perfect antidote for effective partnerships, but we do think that we have a structure that is quite effective and provides a good set of checks and balances, a good system for monitoring, and one that enjoys the requisite buy-in from multiple partners to achieve results. And this is the experience that I would like to share with you a little bit about this afternoon. I don't think that I need to reiterate the many unique challenges facing SIDS that's well articulated in the SAMOA pathway, as well as in discussion over these 2 days during the symposium. We know that there's tremendous labor market issues that need to be tackled, informality, youth unemployment, and other challenges. But given these challenges and the prevailing circumstances of the global economy and climate change coupled with that, it is critically important to ensure that strong partnerships are generated to assist SIDS in reaching their development objectives. The ILO recognizes that significant financial resources will need to be mobilized to achieve the SDGs, particularly in SIDS, but we also acknowledge that success will also require significant support through non-financial means as well. As a normative agency, the ILO recognizes that partnerships to encourage compliance and respect for labor standards and the protection of workers through engagement with social partners, or what we like to acknowledge as the real economy, are equally critical. And this is one of the central points that I would like to emphasize. The value of good industrial relations and social dialogue can encourage more effective partnerships to achieve the priorities and development objectives that we're all here in looking for solutions to achieve. This was a point that was well articulated yesterday by His Excellency, the Minister of Grenada, and also I've heard the same emphasis in numerous other sessions. Social dialogue and industrial relations finds a fairly solid historical base here in the Caribbean, whereas in the Pacific, historically, a number of countries just simply do not have the culture of tripartism with respect to labor and employment issues. However, there is a growing number of countries that have formally established tripartite labor bodies, and this is something that the ILO would like to cite as an opportunity for strengthening as we move towards developing partnerships and implementing the SDGs. In the last few years, the establishment of tripartite bodies in the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Samoa, and to some extent in Kiribati really is a signal that we're moving in the right direction. And this is important because the need for bottom-up interventions and partnerships that respond to local needs cannot be overemphasized. Be it a skills development partnership in Timor-Leste, a child labor through education partnership in Fiji, or a regional social development project in the Caribbean, all such partnerships that the ILO engages in involves the social partners, either in the design or in the implementation, or most often in both the design and implementation. It is really our confirmed conviction that without strong labor market institutions, meeting the decent work challenges goals and targets as set out in the SDGs will be extremely difficult. And need I also remind that decent work is one of the central means of implementation that is included in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Now, moving on to public-private partnerships, I would just like to touch upon this issue because it has been a source of debate within the United Nations for some time, and also the role of the private sector has been brought up in numerous sessions of this symposium. We know that realizing Goal 17 on the revitalization of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development, that new, enhanced, more innovative partnerships are needed, and this obviously includes the private sector. And here the ILO also has a significant number of examples and good experiences where we have engaged in PPPs. In fact, 2014 and 2015 were record-breaking years for the ILO. We signed 92 new public-private partnerships, and funding reached $27.5 million, which represents the fifth largest contributor to the ILO's extra budgetary funding. So it's quite significant. And we recognize that PPPs bring a significant development outcomes. We know that they're very important. However, the ILO does not do business with everyone. And I think this must be emphasized, that engagement in PPPs requires enhanced coordination to ensure that a rights-based approach is upheld, that necessary checks and balances are in place, and that there is an effective monitoring system in place that is in line with national development frameworks, of course. And the ILO has developed a specific guideline for public-private partnerships that has been applied since 2009. And this has ensured an internal coordination of efforts and also sound internal clearance mechanisms, which requires compliance through a consultation process with the social partners. So again, the social partners play a very critical role in who we engage with. Essentially, anytime a private sector entity approaches the ILO, or before we even approach the private sector, we submit, sometimes there isn't even a proposal, to our respective bureaus for employers and workers' activities, who bring the proposal or the idea back to their constituents for a vetting process, comes back to the ILO, to our partnerships department, or to the Director General. And if ever there's a red flag, we go back, we try to negotiate, but sometimes the reality is we don't have the mandate to move forward. And this is just to say that there is really a strong emphasis on the buy-in and the effective vetting process that the social partners can provide. And I think this is one of the key lessons learned. We have found that when social partners are involved in the design and implementation, this has resulted in further increased participation and buy-in. And it also provides that high degree of oversight and monitoring that is so important. And like any partnership, again, I want to reiterate that the ILO does not view PPPs only as a source of funding. From our perspective, again, it also implies the sharing of other kinds of resources, such as the exchange and pooling of knowledge, research, capacity building, and so on. And we have many examples that we're happy to share of how this has worked. We have a really interesting project in Haiti where we're working with the private sector to increase productivity in the factories, promoting labor standards, reviewing national legislation, and also building sustainability into the programming. So to conclude, I would just like to reemphasize that effective partnerships need effective partners. Effective partnerships need effective partners. And based on the ILO's 100 years of experience, we find that this must include the voice from business and trade unions. And this is critical to ensure that those locally tailored solutions that impact those most in need are actually found. And I would also reiterate that while traditional development path may not always be feasible, and we know it isn't feasible in SIDS, but one of the critical foundations for development, no matter where, is that job-rich growth includes the protection of fundamental rights at work and facilitating social dialogue. These decent work principles will continue to guide the ILO's partnerships, and we stand ready to support you, our constituents, in sharing of lessons learned, developing those partnerships towards the achievement of the objectives of the SAMOA pathway and the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation on the long-standing work that ILO has been doing on partnerships